Welcome to Into the Woods, a journey with the tarot. Here, we wander together into the woods to explore ourselves, the world around us, and the mysteries and joys of life through the tarot. I'm your host, Mari, a professional tarot reader and a musician. Grab your deck, and off we go. Welcome back to Into the Woods, everyone. I'm your host, Mari, and this week we're going to talk about some royalty. One big point of tension that I have with the tarot is this sort of representation of gender and, this so-called divine feminine and masculine in the tarot, and there's sort of a limitation, a limiting feeling sometimes on how it's represented through the tarot that I struggle with. I have mentioned before on the podcast, but I often like to use decks that are a lot more diverse than the Rider-Waite-Smith. And a lot of times I use decks that are mostly, if not all, femme, like the Modern Witch Tarot, or more recently I've been liking the Tarot of the Witch's Garden. And I will say that this helps my overall somewhat traumatized relationship with masculinity and the unhealthy masculine energy in the world today. And that's totally valid. But today we're going to take a look at the kings and queens in the deck and specifically work through some of this, this difficulty or this challenging aspect of the tarot, which is that like gender as a representation, a symbolic representation of things is very real and it's effective and it's sort of important, but we don't want to be limited or sort of box people or things into this masculine feminine polarity. We want to not fall into harmful gender norms. And I think I'm not totally sure, if I'm doing that 100%, but I wanted to start exploring that by looking at the kings and queens in tarot. And I'd be curious as I talk through this, whether anyone else has any thoughts or feelings about this as well. And I'd love for you to reach out to me. You can connect with me on Instagram at Mari of the Woods. Mari is spelled M-A-R-I, or of course via email. The email is info@mariofthewoods.com. I've been pulling a lot of court cards recently and have been sorting through how I differentiate the energy of the kings and the queens. As a feminist who does not want to in any way promote harmful gendered stereotypes through the tarot, I sometimes struggle with how heavily the polarities in tarot rely on masculine and feminine archetypes. This is one of the reasons I enjoy, as I said, using decks like the Modern Witch Tarot, which is all femme figures. It kind of helps me get beyond that sort of oversimplified thinking. Anyway, we can't deny that the archetype of masculine and feminine traits are everywhere in the tarot. The magician and the high priestess, the empress and the emperor, the kings and queens, etc. I'm sure in earlier times and generations, the queen was thought to be somehow below or maybe not as mature or masterful as the king. I like to interpret the king and queen as equal in terms of their mastery of the suit and their sense of leadership in the suit as well. But if that's the case, then what's the difference? How do we differentiate the energies between the two without falling into harmful gender stereotypes and saying things like, oh yeah, the queen is more receptive or softer or like a mother? I've seen the queens connected to introversion, receptivity, motherhood, and the kings likewise connected to extroversion, action, fatherhood, but these feel pretty tired to me and outdated. So I'd like to explore some other more modern or evolved ways of thinking about this. And I apologize if my thoughts aren't the most organized. I feel like I'm still working through this myself and think that working it out on the podcast is kind of fun and helpful, hopefully for me and for you. Let's talk about the queens first. In today's slang, we often use queen as a compliment or term for someone who we feel is absolutely slaying it. It is people we see being their authentic self, someone who, for example, really owns their sexuality. Maybe they're incredibly stylish and badass. They're somehow showing that they're unafraid to be themselves. Maybe they're charismatic, maybe they're inspiring, maybe they're taking risks, being bold, or maybe they're just being so honest. Sometimes it's someone who's really good at setting boundaries or taking care of themselves. We often refer to inspiring artists like Beyonce and Lady Gaga as queens. And these are artists who have inspired massive amounts of people. They have created their own community, their own worlds. They have connected people through a shared vision. So instead of limiting our tarot queens as some kind of introverted, soft, or motherly figure, or potentially someone who supports the king and the king's vision, I like to think of the queens as like real spitfires, belonging completely to themselves and able to access incredible creativity. They inspire others effortlessly. They have gained incredible wisdom through experience. They have taken the time to know themselves. And they may have a softness and a feminine beauty, but it is balanced by the seriousness of their position, the power that comes with the position of being queen. They are leaders, unafraid to make difficult decisions and speak with utter honesty, really do what needs to get done, say what needs to be said, feel what needs to be felt, etc. They are all intuitive, in my opinion. I think women are incredibly intuitive, every single one. And they're able to tap into the needs of their people. This part does kind of remind me of motherhood, how there's like this weird instinct where we just know what our children need or what the people around us need. And I think that's a superpower and very cool. So I love attributing that to the queens, knowing the needs of their people, the collective, those around them. And they really wield their power for love. But they know when tough love is needed too. It's not this like gentle, soft love, but it's really what's needed for growth, for nurturing, even if it's the hard thing. I've been feeling this really personally in my life because my daughter had a pretty major sleep regression. She's 2.5. And for quite a long time, she's waking up everybody in the house. And like, finally, I determined that we had to do sleep training. And it's such a hard thing to do. In the short term, it's so brutal, for like 1 day or 2 days. It's really tough and you feel terrible, but it's knowing what's best in the long run. And the trade-off is so big with my daughter, especially. It was like after 1 day, she was already sleeping better. We were all sleeping better. Everybody was doing better. And all it took was like a few hours of difficulty or, her not having exactly what she wanted. I don't know why I went down that tangent, but just kind of having that confidence to know when tough love or just a hard thing is necessary. I think that's very queenly too. Moving on to the kings, I will say it's a little harder for me with the king. Like many of the other masculine leader type characters in tarot, it's just so easy in this day and age to think of abusive examples of masculine power. There just seem to be so few benevolent kings these days. So many world leaders, company CEOs, etc., seem completely detached from the needs of the people, power hungry, violent, abusive at worst, and that's like not really an energy I want to project onto the kings in tarot. Of course, those things can come up in the shadow side of these cards, or when bringing up certain people in readings, maybe those feel accurate. But in general, I do love taking a more hopeful, expansive view of our court cards and our characters in the tarot. One really benevolent king type person I could think of was the previous president of Ireland. His name is Michael D. Higgins. He looks like this adorable, sweet old man, but was like unanimously just loved by everyone. And he was a huge supporter of the arts, of social equality and inclusion and anti-racism. And I just think that's so cool. I mean, go Ireland. Nobody else has that right now. Instead of getting stuck down the toxic masculinity or the patriarchal black hole, let's envision a healthy king. A king that is beloved, that is just, inspiring, that is truly in service to the land and the people, a protector, an eloquent speaker, highly educated and experienced in so many facets of life that you just trust their wisdom. You trust them to take care of things. They're there for you. They're strategic, able to think for the long term. That is something I feel like a lot of our world leaders are struggling with right now. It's like short-term gain in exchange for long-term suffering and struggle and putting off problems to the future, which is awful. But our tarot kings don't have to do that. They can be strategic and think in the long term and make sacrifices. The kings surround themselves with others who have a shared vision and integrity, and they know how to delegate and help others grow and thrive, right? They bring others up with them, which the queens do too. I think both the kings and queens are real visionaries and able to put their plans into action, not afraid of struggle or hard situations. In fact, the kings and queens know that those parts of life, of ruling, of leading, are necessary. They stay calm, cool, and collected in a crisis. Like, especially the king, I just feel like there's this sort of stability. Nothing's going to rattle them. They're super solid, very earthy. The differences in the energy of the king and queen in some ways are pretty subtle, and I think that's why I've been wanting to take a deeper look there. One other tool that might help our understanding or sort of separating them a little bit is associating the queens with the element of water and the kings to earth. This is interesting because the cup suit, which is water, and the pentacle suit, which is earth, are both considered to be related to the feminine. And that's true in astrology as well, and pretty much everything else. Like water and earth are our feminine elements. But I honestly love that. I love when things are mixed up. So even though earth is considered feminine, that is the element of the kings. So with the queens as water, that helps us remember to bring in that intuitive aspect, the creativity, the dreaming, envisioning new worlds, and of course, the deep connection with emotion. Water is life-giving. It's necessary for survival. It is fluid and flexible. And with water, I always think of the ocean and the traits of the ocean as well. So we can bring in the vastness, the wildness, the untamable part. It's mysterious, deep, related to the unconscious. So pulling all those ideas in with the queens, I think, is also really cool. The kings being related to earth, we're thinking more structure, solidity, the here and now, present moment, materiality, understanding what's right in front of you, prioritizing what's right in front of you, manifestation, right? The kings, to me, all have a little bit of magician energy, right? Able to take, maybe instead of, the magician who's reaching up to the heavens, they're using their suit, the cup, the pentacle, etc., to manifest or make things real, make things happen. So instead of the ocean here, we're going to think of a garden, which requires labor, hard work, patience, strategy, planning. Like, those are all things I would tie into the kings as well. I recently listened to a great astrology workshop on Saturn, and Saturn we think of as, not our friendliest planet in astrology. It's like constriction, hard work, breaking down identity, and all kinds of things like that, generally difficult things. But Saturn was also the lord of agriculture and understood that the patience, the hard work, the labor is necessary for that result in the end, right? The bounty, the harvest. So I think that the kings all have this sort of patient quality, the willingness to put in the work on behalf of their constituents, the collective, their family, the people, right? All that. So there's this sort of dedication to the world that the kings have that I think is really lovely. All of the kings and queens are depicted seated in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, seated on a throne, of course. And in addition to making it obvious what kind of position they hold, I think this also brings a sort of groundedness or a an absence of striving. It's like there's no need to go out and prove who they are or continue journeying to find themselves. They've really arrived. Again, that sort of master element, like they are who they are. They have experienced much of life and gained great wisdom and maturity. And I love some of the nuance, like the King of Wands sort of looks like he's about to come out of his chair. And I think that represents that sort of passion and fire of the wand suit, right? This readiness to get up and go. Whereas the King and Queen of Pentacles look like they've almost grown into their chair, like somehow the nature has enveloped them. They're just part of the scenery almost, like there's no way they're going to be moving. And, that really reflects that earth energy, that stability and that part of nature and that presence with the environment. So there are some little clues here and there with how they're depicted that help us bring in the energy of the suit, but they are all seated, all in somewhat similar position. I will say I don't want to completely ignore the mother and father archetypes here because I do see that come up a lot. It's more that I just don't want to limit it to that. The queens can be representation of our mothers or us as a mother or a sort of nurturing and caring instinct. But it can also be like fucking Beyonce being a sexy queen, building basically a cult and an entire empire around herself. Like, yeah, slay. When we pull court cards and we believe them to be related to specific people or even ourselves, I do want to say how important it is to sort of ignore gender as like, the king has to be a man in your life or the queen has to be a woman in your life. I recently did a relationship reading for someone and I pulled the Queen of Pentacles for a man. And I find that really fascinating, and it totally checked out with where this person was in their life. They had been extremely successful as far as career and were retiring kind of early and spending time with their children and taking care of themselves and slowing down and just enjoying life and enjoying the beautiful home that they created. And so I think it can be hard because we're just wired to think about people, gendered, right? Like if we pull a queen, the first people we see in our lives we're going to think of is our mom or other women. But it just doesn't have to be that way. The truth is that we all hold all of the court cards within us. Just like in astrology, we all have the entire zodiac within us. It's the same with the court cards. Right? We all have these different facets to ourselves at different times, different parts of us coming through. I often think of myself as having a lot of Knight of Swords energy, but at the same time, sometimes I feel very Queen of Wands and sometimes I feel very King of Cups. So the actual gender is irrelevant, but it's more about the balance of energies and what that archetypal masculine or feminine representation might mean, or the balance of them in the cards. So yeah, this has been really fun to just kind of think through and start this conversation here on the podcast. I'm hoping to continue my development of this. I may do another episode exploring some kings and queens in mythology or fairy tale or things like that to deepen my relationship and yours with the queen and king archetypes. And that way making these tarot cards a little bit more rich, more vast, and giving you a little bit more to pull from, and myself as well. Thank you so much again for listening. If you've been enjoying the podcast, please drop a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and drop a subscription, maybe like the video on YouTube. You can find me on TikTok and Instagram at Mari of the Woods. And I do, of course, offer private readings. You can book a reading on my website or reach out to me at info@mariofthewoods.com. I hope you have an amazing week, and until next time, happy wandering.